She is currently pursuing further education in philanthropy studies with the Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University. Rafiat's unique blend of project management skills, philanthropic experience, and passion for social impact makes her a valuable contributor to discussions on effective nonprofit management, sustainable development, and innovative approach to addressing societal challenges. So Ms. Rafiat is also going to be a mentor for us in today's class. Another mentor we're expecting in today's class is Mr. George Onyewuchi. Mr. George Enrichi is a fintech mentor. Mr. George Enrichi is currently heads fintech engagements for First Bank and its subsidiaries across Africa at its digital innovation lab, setting up and driving the bank's fintech strategy. George is a link that connects technology, business, and ecosystem partnership. He is at the intersection of products and partnership and ecosystem building. He has led the tech solution product development for the SME banking business of a leading commercial bank and has taken numerous financial and non-financial products from idea to market and growth. He has led digital transformation in the client engagement processes for leading commercial banks, including one of the Nigerian banking industry first end-to-end account opening for corporate accounts and SME digital lending. His team has won numerous awards for powering growth of SMEs. He also provides advisory for Crypto Africa towards developing blockchain infrastructure, building the operating system for African businesses on the blockchain, and hosts knowledge section on blockchain application to various industries within the African context. Yes, so Mr. George is another mentor we'll be having in today's class. And last but not least, for our mentors in today's session is Mr. Tunde Kelani. Mr. Tunde Kelani is an experienced business strategist and team lead on several consultancy for top private and public organizations, which includes Dangote Group, HP Nigeria, Nigerian Breweries, Leadway Assurance, University of Nigeria, federal government ministries and agencies, of which includes the timely and effective implementation of project activities for Niger Delta Amnesty Training Program in Ogun State. He is a consultant with the Bank of Industry and the ESP Youth Entrepreneurship Support Program and the GEF, that is the Graduate Entrepreneurship Fund projects. He also developed the curriculum for the IFAD, that is the International Fund for Agricultural Development Training for young farmers across the northern central zone of in Nigeria. He believes that people are more capable and valuable than they often give or get credits for. His method marries the sublime with the systematic, allowing for creativity and change with a strong focus on foundation and implementation. He leads the team at Starkfield Company and is also a co-founder at Hadada Hadada Finance. That is a fintech API platform. So those are going to be our mentors for today. Okay, I'm trying to check if we have them on board so that we can get straight to the business of the day. Okay, so please just kindly give me a moment. I'm trying to work on having them join in this session. Okay, sorry for the for the short silence. So just to keep us updated, um, I think we'll be having a few mentors running a bit late today. Hopefully, I think five to in about 10 to 15 minutes, we'll be having them join in. So sorry about that. They are running a bit late, but they'll be joining us soon, very soon. So while we wait for them to do that, I'll quickly want us to at least take the picture for today, our picture time for today, so that we don't have to deal with that later on. So please, I would like to crave your indulgence for our pictures, and then in the next 10 to 15 minutes, we would officially continue with this session. So thank you so much for your patience. Right, so let's quickly take our pictures. Okay, just a few minutes, just one more minute. I can see some of us are still trying to get our videos on. So I'll quickly try to still do that. All right, so we are done with that. We are done with that. Thank you all for cooperating. So like I said, our mentors will be running a bit late. We apologize for that. But just before we start, just to overall engage us, seeing that we are coming to the end of the program, I think next week we'll be having our closing ceremony next week. And then a few activities already, we've scheduled a few activities for you all to participate in, including what we call what we call exams in technical sense, but it's just overall just to evaluate, you know, your knowledge base, just a quick quiz to evaluate your knowledge base based off of the course that you have taken in the last 5 weeks. So we'll be doing that all next week. But just so I can just engage us in the next few minutes before we have our mentors join in, I would like to, okay, just a minute. Okay, yeah. So I would just like to engage us for a bit to just kindly find out how the program has been for us. We'll be taking, I think, maybe 3 or 4 mentees. You can just share your experience so far with the program and how everything has been for you. And then, you know, subsequently, as our mentors join in, we would start this session. Once again, apologies for the little delay. So we
Okay.
want to go.
Sorry, Dennis. Yeah, Dennis. After
Okay, Mr. Max,
morning.
I can see you on the call.
Yes, I wanted to just let you know I joined the call. Sorry and apologies for joining late. But I think you
Okay,
can
no
take some
problem.
of the feedback before we get started. I think that's fine.
Oh, all right, no problem. Thank you so much, Mr. Max, for joining. So we'll be taking, I think, maybe 1 or 2 feedbacks from the mentees. So, so if I call your name, please don't feel shy, right? We just want to get a little feedback from you based off of your experience in the program, right? Just a minute or so. Just tell us your name, which course you are under, and then, how's your experience been so far? Okay, I would be calling at random. I would like to call Muna. Sorry if I call your name, please. We'll just like for you to kindly respond just quickly in a minute. Muna, if you're with us, we'll just like to get a little feedback from you.
Okay, um, good morning, everyone. So I am taking the patent drafting course. So far, it has been very insightful. I love the fact that before we come and have our meetings and teaching sessions, we are engaged in compiling our group presentation, various articles. It helps us get a sense of what the mentors are actually coming to talk to us about. And listening to our own presentation and receiving corrections from the mentors has been really, really insightful and very engaging. I love how the whole course has been going so far. So I've had a really good time. So thank you for asking.
All right, thank you, Muna. I think next I will just call at random Ibrahim Mariam. If you can hear me, Mariam, we just want to get a little feedback from you.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning.
So far I've really enjoyed this whole program and I've learned a lot, things that I didn't even know before and I didn't even know related. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say. It was really nice and informative for me.
All right, thank you very much, Miriam. Sorry, again, just to kindly ask, you are under which course?
AI and emerging technology.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Miriam. So yeah, it's nice to hear the little feedback from those two mentees. I'm sure we've all had our own separate experience, and come next week during the closing ceremony, we'll get to hear from several of you share your thoughts and your experience as to how the program has been for you. All right, so just to really get into class, we would like to give the floor to Mr. Max Ikombe for his discourse into this session. Like I said, our topic for today is fundraising for startups. Mr. Max, you're welcome, sir. Would want to hear from you, share what you've prepared for us in class.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Good morning, and good morning to all the mentees on the call. Let me also congratulate the mentees who have stuck with the program so far. I've always thought the Jiipcc program is really a very nice program because a lot of the areas that the Jiipcc program covers are areas that traditionally were not essentially accessible to people in this part of, young professionals starting out their careers in this part of the world. You had to just figure it out yourself, or except maybe you are in any big organization or maybe a big law firm that is able to afford in those days placements, secondments, and those kinds of opportunities that expose you to some of these areas. But it's a good thing that Jiipcc has come to bridge that gap in knowledge, and amongst many other things, one of what this program does for you, more importantly than just connecting you or giving you access to the mentors, is that you need to also understand that the access you have to your fellow mentees is also very important. Because I tell people, in the professional services world, more often than not, one of your greatest critical success factors is your contemporaries, not even necessarily the people who, in a sense, are your senior in that field. So it is your fellows, the other mentees you meet here, who can open you up to access to new opportunities, to new ideas and things that you may not have thought about before now. Because the bottom line of it remains that in the professional services space, I'm a lawyer, so I would speak particularly in the legal space. If you're an external lawyer, you are running your own law firm, or you are an external lawyer, more often than not, the people who are going to bring instructions to you, particularly from the corporate side of your instructions, typically are your classmates and your friends who have also maybe themselves risen to become the head of legal department in companies. They are usually the ones who would most likely give you instructions. So I'm just saying all that to say, in this program, in as much as the opportunity and the access to mentors are important, note also, do not take for granted the opportunity and access you have to your fellow mentees as well. You know, it can become one of your greatest critical success factors. So today we are talking about fundraising for startups. I would just give some quick overview. Increasingly, of course, if you have heard me speak on any of these programs, what I always try to do is that beyond just the specifics, we try to look more broadly, particularly from the historical background of issues, so that it helps you really, place in context. Because I know already by now, most of your groups have already done detailed research and preparation. So in the course of doing that detailed preparation, you have come across the main issues in question. But sometimes I think what helps you to truly understand what you have studied is to have a broad background, against which the topic is being discussed. So when it comes to fundraising for startups, the question you should be asking yourself, and which is why having that big background overview is important, is why, what is unique about fundraising for startups that is not, for other companies. When you ask that question, then what it takes you back to is to ask yourself, what is corporate finance? Because for companies, because startups, of course, are companies. Companies are financed, in a different way from other entities. So, for instance, governments, we have public finance, which is how governments raise money, spend money, and account for money. It's kind of a different field of study. We have personal finance, for instance, and many of you may have attended personal finance courses where you learn how to save, how to invest as a person, how to achieve your goals. Of course, personal finance, for instance, will be telling you things like planning for the future if you're still a young person, planning, having savings to meet your, early life requirements, getting married, getting a house, planning for your kids. Of course, as you get into middle ages, the next concern becomes, how do I build my own house? How do I plan for when my children will get into university? Do I want them to study in Nigeria? Do I want them to study abroad? How do I plan and ensure I have enough finances to cover that? How do I plan and have enough finances to take care of my younger ones? If you are from families where the older ones are expected to take care of the younger ones, how do I take care of my aged parents, and all of that, until you get to that phase of life where you're already getting close to retirement, and your concern is, how do I save off enough money that when I enter into my retirement stages, I'll have enough finances. So that's kind of personal financing. So I'm just showing you that governments, excuse me. Yeah, apologies, sorry, excuse me. Yeah. So I'm just saying, you can see that different entities have different financing needs and need to have a strategy for raising funds to meet their needs. So in the same way, we also have the field of corporate finance, which essentially is how companies raise money to meet their objectives, to stay afloat, how they ensure that there's accountability for that money, how they distribute the money, and ensure that all relevant stakeholders, are properly financed and are benefiting from the activities of that company. So when we zone back now, because startup fundraising is a subset of corporate finance, but when we look at corporate finance as a whole, as a category, we begin to see certain trends that make it necessary to have a unique strategy to raising funds for startups. Now, in corporate financing, of course, there are lots of terminologies you hear. I won't bore you with all of them, but one of the things you hear a lot is what we call the balance sheet. So, without going to the technicalities of it, a balance sheet simply is supposed to be let me call it a document or an account where all the assets and the liabilities of a company are weighed up. Now, why is a balance sheet important? Allow me to go backwards a little bit more. Now, in law, a company is viewed as a separate person from the owners of the company. When we say person now, we're not talking about a natural human person, but we're talking about the attributes of personality. One of the attributes of personality, for instance, is the ability to own property. So as a person, as a human person, I own a phone, I own a laptop, I can own a house, I can own a car. Abstract or non-personalities, for instance, cannot have the concept of ownership. So for instance, a dog cannot own a house, but you can say, for instance, that you buy maybe a toy for your dog, and you can say, oh, that is my dog's ball, or that is my dog's toy. But in that sense, you are just saying that this item I own, I have exclusively dedicated it to be enjoyed by this, by this dog. But that dog, now not being a person in law, cannot, for instance, go to court to lay claim, and maybe, and we know some of these things happen in the advanced countries, where a person dies and he leaves behind in his will assets for his pet, for instance. So there's a popular case of somebody who left, I think, about how many $1 million for a cat or something like that. But you know that, of course, for that cat to enjoy the benefits of the assets that was left to the cat, there needs to be human trustees or a corporate trustee company that will, hold that asset on behalf of that, a non-person. So I'm just saying of that to explain to you why a company is actually considered a person in law. So a company can actually own property, it can own land, it can own a house, it can own laptops. And the company itself, my apology again, sorry, just having some irritation in my nose. So in the same way, so a company can go to court, for instance, and claim ownership of a house, claim ownership of a car, separate from the people that own the company. So when we think about it that way now, you need to understand that the way in you as a human person, the substance that represents your life, for instance, is blood. And the moment you lose too much blood from your body, you die. In the same way for companies, what really keeps them alive in that sense really is their finances. So, and that is why you hear the word that a company is technically insolvent. Insolvent simply means that that company, the liabilities that company have outweighed the assets that the company has, meaning therefore that the company will not be able to meet its obligations if that company continues to run, as a business the way it is going. That means the time will come when that company can no longer pay salaries, it can no longer pay its vendors and the suppliers. So the balance sheet essentially is the document that tells you the financial health, or in a sense, the health of a company, whether that company is healthy or the company is already in an intensive care unit, or the company is about to die. And that's why when the company gets to a point where it can no longer meet its obligations, then the law has a procedure, what we call insolvency, where that company is, in a sense, the company dies and is buried. Because just like a human person, is giving birth to, lives his life, dies, and is buried, the company also is given birth to by registration, or what we call incorporation in the relevant company registry of the company of the country where that company operates from. So by the act of incorporation and the issuance of the certificate of incorporation, the company becomes a person. And also, if that company becomes insolvent through the same process as well, that company now dies and is buried, called insolvency. Of course, there's another aspect of it now that I would call business rescue or business recovery, where sometimes the company is already in an intensive care unit. It looks like it wants to die, but professionals are brought in and say, look, rather than liquidate the company, that is, kill it off and make it insolvent. And of course, let me just explain. Liquidation or insolvency simply means that somebody called the liquidator is appointed, whose duty is to realize, that is to get all the assets of the company, sell them, and pay up all the liabilities. And then whatever is left after you have paid the liabilities of the company, you distribute, you share to the owners, the shareholders in the company, and then officially the company is dead and buried. So having that at the back of our mind, we now see that in essence, what it means is that the lifeblood of a company, just the way your lifeblood is the blood that flows in your vein, the lifeblood of a company is really financing. Once a company doesn't have access to financing, for instance, it doesn't have a startup doesn't have access to financing, then that company cannot survive. So corporate finance really is the art of survival of a company, of keeping the company afloat, of having enough income coming into the company, controlling that income, ensuring that that income satisfies the requirements of that company, and that there's accountability to the stakeholders in the company. So you can see that for established companies, therefore, the way they raise funds, in essence, at the bottom line of it all, is by showing that their balance sheet is healthy enough to convince third parties to invest money into their company. So when a company wants to raise funds, really what it's just saying is that because it's just the practical example would be that if someone is dying or is on his deathbed and he comes to you to ask for a loan, I'm sure you'd likely not be willing to give that loan because of, yes, if I give you this loan and you pass on, how do I get my money back? So it's the same thing also with a company. If a company's balance sheet is showing that the company is not healthy and the company is about to die off, then no third party is willing to give funds to that company. Therefore, that company is not able to raise funds. So fundraising at its bottom line really is about a company being able to show a balance sheet that is healthy enough to persuade third parties to invest money into that company. Sometimes the balance sheet is showing that the company doesn't have money or the company is in red financially, but the balance sheet is showing certain assets that are on that balance sheet that if additional funding is given to the company, that asset can generate enough money to pay back the loan and to now reactivate the company and bring it back alive. So, for instance, a company has a piece of land in maybe an area in Abuja that before now was not a choice location, but suddenly there's a new express road, passing through that location, and that company at that point is in debt, maybe to the tune of 1 billion naira. But the company can show a bank, for instance, that look, we own this land in a location that has become a good location because of a new express road passing beside the land. But however, for us to be able to take possession of that land and make use of it, we need to pay outstanding ground rent of maybe 100 million to the FCT administration. We need to get a licensed surveyor to help us lay out the land into plots. We need to at least be able to fence the land, put up a gate, and advertise an estate in the land. And once we do all of that, we were able to sell this land and make 10 billion, meaning that we can pay you back the 1 billion loan you are giving us, maybe with interest of another 200 million, 1.2 billion, and our company is going to come back alive. So you can see that even though that company was already distressed, but because of the asset it has, there's suddenly, on its balance sheet, there's hope that if money is injected into that company, the company can come back alive. So I'm saying all of this to just give you a broad idea of what corporate finance is all about and how the baseline of corporate finance is that companies must show that they have assets that are enough to attract new funding for them to, turn over that fund, make enough money to pay back the funding, and then have enough money to continue to sustain their business. So when we come now to startups that we're talking about today now, you can see that there's already a challenge. Now, established companies, when they're going to corporate financing, they already have a balance sheet, they have enough assets to justify their demand or their request for more funding. Sometimes funding, and of course, we know that funding is of two types. There's debt and there's equity. So debt simply means that you are taking money and with a promise to repay back that money along with interest. So irrespective of the success or the failure of your business, you are under obligation to repay back that money. That's essentially, of course, what we call a loan. But of course, sometimes debt capital is not always only a loan. It can be structured in many ways. But the bottom line of debt capital is that you are under obligation, you must pay back that money, whether you succeed in the business or not. When we talk of equity, equity simply means money that comes into your business as an investment and that would only earn the person who put that money in returns on investment. There's no obligation to pay back that money along with interest, but you have obligation to now, for that person to get a profit share arising from his investment of that money. So you can see that these are two broad ways that any corporation can fund its business activities. Startups also, can also fund their activity that way. But in all that I have discussed, you can see that because your funding really still comes down to your balance sheet, you can see that established companies have an advantage with debt funding because they are already existing and they are already established. They can more easily take a loan from a bank or even from any other party with a promise to pay back that loan along with interest, knowing fully well that once that loan comes into their company, they already have an establishment, or maybe they have a factory that can quickly turn around that money, make enough income to pay back the loan, and then to continue the strategic funding of that business. So you can see that for established businesses, typically they are more easy. The more easy way to raise funds for them is through debt because they have enough assets to justify the debt. But for a startup, we know that most startups do not have enough assets. They are just starting up. Maybe it's 2 or 3 guys. They have the idea. They are using a room in their house. They don't have any land. They don't have cars. Maybe they just have the individual laptops owned by the owners of the startups themselves. So if they're, think about it. If a Dangote approaches you for a loan and a startup approaches you for a loan, the likelihood is that you give Dangote a loan, you won't give the startup a loan, because with Dangote, you know that if I give Dangote this loan, he has a factory, a cement factory in Kogi State, he has a refinery in Lagos State. If he does not pay me my money back, I can go to court and I can take any of those assets to pay my money back. But these startup guys, these young guys who just came to you with their laptops and you're wondering, if I give these guys 10 million and they don't pay me back, what do I do? We see their laptops I'm going to take and sell, or maybe the small car they are managing. They don't have access to justify it. So you see that it is easier for the startups to raise equity funding. So if they come to me and they give me an idea and I see that, oh, this idea is really unique and it's something that the market would like, it's easier for me to say, look, I'll give you the money as equity. And because from what I see about this your idea, if this your idea actually blows, I'm giving you just 10 million, but this idea can easily make 10 billion. So it means that the 10 million I'm giving you can maybe give me 10% of your company, and that 10% when you make 10 billion becomes 1 billion naira. So you can see that funding, doing equity funding for a startup, it usually makes a lot more sense. But if I'm dealing with somebody like Dangote, if Dangote has need, for instance, of 1 billion, because he already has an established business, he's not even interested in giving me equity because he wants control of his company. He just wants the money, turn over the money and pay me back my money with interest, rather than giving me control or equity in his business. So you can see how different kinds of companies approach the issue of fundraising. So when it comes to fundraising for startups, and as professionals who would likely advise startups, in this early phase of our career, we must have all of this at the back of our mind, that there's always a tension between debt and equity financing for startups. While equity, as I've described, is easier for startups to give out, there's also a danger, because it means that when you give out equity, particularly when your business is still, at a very low valuation, then you lose control of your business. Now, another keyword that is important for you to understand, just like we talked about balance sheet, is valuation. When it comes to fundraising for startups, valuation is very important, because the value at which equity comes into your company determines a lot. So practical illustration, you're a startup, you just started, you have a very innovative idea. At that point, you don't have much assets. You just have, 3 or 4 laptops. You have maybe a car that the co-founders are sharing. Maybe one of the co-founders' parents gave a little tiny office to you guys to use for, to run the business. So at that point, the company really has no assets that can really increase its valuation. But nominally, you are at that point valued at, okay, we have an exclusive agreement signed with one company, and you value yourself, say, at 10 million naira. So at that point, the company is valued at 10 million naira. It means that if I come into that business and because the business has run out of money, you need to develop your prototype, and the prototype is going to cost you 2 million to develop, and I give you 2 million as equity. It means that because your company is worth 10 million at that time, my 2 million naira gives me 20% equity in your company. So it means that if that prototype works and the business suddenly blows and the business becomes worth 1 billion, suddenly my 20%, which was only 2 million naira, has suddenly become 200 million naira. So it therefore means that as a startup, even though equity is attractive to give, the reason why as a startup giving equity when you are still in your foundational stages and when your valuation has not risen, the danger of giving equity is that you are essentially, in a sense, throwing a lot of money away, because the moment you give that equity, not only, number one, the person is gaining 20% control of your company, that's one layer. Then number two, the person is going to get a disproportionate return on investment. The person only put 2 million naira, and maybe in 6 months he's getting 200 million naira back. Of course, not like that is necessarily a bad thing, but that's just saying that 200 million naira could easily have been yours if you, instead of getting the 2 million as equity, you took the 2 million as a loan. But again, like I mentioned to you, the tension is always that if you tell me to give you that money as a loan, my fear is, how can you pay me back my money? So of course, one way is that if one of the parents of the co-founders is rich enough, he can give a personal guarantee and say, look, give my people this 2 million naira as a loan. If they do not pay back, I will pay back. That could also be another way. Of course, not a typical way, because I mean, if they had a parent who had that kind of money, he would likely give them the money himself rather than make them get a loan. So you can see that when it comes to startups, fundraising is not easy, because debt is difficult to get because you don't have assets to justify it. Equity is also dangerous to get because equity can easily dilute your ownership in and control of that business. So as a professional advising startups, when it comes to fundraising, there's always a tension. It's not the easiest of things to do. Now, some things have been developed that help. So one of them, one concept that helps is what we call convertible debt. So it is possible for a startup to get money and reach an agreement that this money we are taking would be a loan that we will pay back with interest. But if we are not able to pay it back with interest at a period of time, then it will be converted into equity in our business. So the same example I gave now, you can now say the 2 million naira I'm giving into your startup will be considered a loan, and you pay me back in 2 years' time with 10% interest. That means you pay me 2.2 million naira in 2 years' time. But however, if you are not able to pay in 2 years' time, or if I choose to, then I'll convert it into equity in the company at that time. So that way you can see that the startup, by doing that, is almost having sort of the best of both worlds. It means that if that 2 million comes in and you're able to turn it over quickly, for instance, and you make 1 billion, all you are owing me is just to give me back 2.2 million naira, and you walk away with your 1.9 plus billion. You don't have to pay me anything more than that. But if you do not make it a convertible debt, then it would mean that I would suddenly own 200 million out of your money. So you can see that a convertible finance actually is also an attractive way for startups to run. Now, one of the most innovative types of convertible financing that startups can get is a type of agreement called a SAFE, developed by one of the very popular startup incubators we know, called Y Combinator. So a SAFE is an acronym. It simply means Simple Agreement for Future Equity. So it's also a convertible debt, but structured in a unique way. So the way a SAFE is structured is simply this, is that at the point I'm giving the money to the startup, the money is a loan to be repaid back. But the money can be converted into equity. But the unique innovation about a SAFE is that when the money is going to be converted back to equity, it will be converted to equity based on the valuation of the company at the time of conversion. So using the same example, I gave 2 million naira to your startup, which at the time I gave the 2 million was worth 10 million. The startup is able to use that money, and in a period, another 2 years, the company is now worth 2 billion naira. If we did not use a safe agreement and we simply said my 2 million can be, and we didn't use, and the money was given as equity, it would mean that I would own 20% of your company and I'll be entitled to 200 million out of your 1 billion. But the beauty of a safe is that at the point of conversion, my 2.2 million will be converted based on the current value of the company. So therefore, my 2.2 million is not going to be 20%, but it will now be 2 million, the percentage that 2 million is of the 1 billion that your company is currently worth at the time, which I believe is 0. My mathematics can be suspicious, but I suspect that will be 0.2%. So it will mean that when I am converting my debt into equity of your company, I would only own 0.2% as opposed to owning 20% of your company if we have done it as a simple equity transaction. So you can see how that is fair to both parties. I'm still getting my money because, sorry, then just to explain that, when the conversion is done in the safe now, it is not only my 2 million that will be converted to equity, but plus the interest we agreed. So my 2.2 million will be converted into shares in the company. Now, why it is mutually beneficial to both parties is that now, even though I'm not getting 20% of the company, I'm only getting 0.2%, which is what my capital investment and my interest earned at the time. But going forward, this 1 billion valuation now, suddenly I become a part of it going forward. So I'm going to be earning dividends, which is profit share on the income at the end of the business year. And as the company grows, now when the company now moves from a valuation of 1 billion to 2 billion, after my equity converted, I only had 0.2%. But when the company now doubles in value, my shareholding will also now move from 0.2% to 0.4%. So you can see that I'm also growing, my investment is also growing along with the growth of the company. So in a sense, it's a scenario that presents a best of both worlds for both parties. For the owner of the startup, you are not losing too much control and profit share in your company. For me, who invested in, who did the investment, I'm also now getting my money, either getting my money back with interest, or I'm getting shares worth the value of my money plus interest, and then any growth potential of the company, I'm also now a part of that growth trajectory, over the long haul. So you can see that it's a model that is quite good. However, the safe model, like I said, was developed by Y Combinator. It's usually done based on the law of the US. So I've seen people do safe agreements in Nigeria, and sometimes I wonder because in the US it works because they have a stable legal framework that governs it. I do not think, and I do not advise startups to enter into safe agreements in Nigeria. If you must enter into a safe agreement as a Nigerian startup, I usually advise them to do what we call a Delaware flip. A Delaware flip is simply a procedure where the startup and the foreign partners incorporate a foreign company, usually in the state of Delaware in the US. That company buys over the startup in Nigeria 100%. Then you can enter into your safe agreement and all those agreements, using the vehicle of the Delaware or the foreign company. So that way, if there's any dispute, the courts in the US state of Delaware, who are used to how safe agreements operate, will be the ones to interpret that agreement and decide on the rights of the parties to that transaction. So typically, that is one of the reasons why we also advise startups to do that flip. I mean, some people have argued that even in Nigeria, that a safe agreement can be done in Nigeria. I would agree to a point, but the difference is this: is that the safe agreement, as invented or established by Y Combinator, is a very simple agreement. It's usually 2 pages long. The reason is because they don't have to write too many things into it. The law in Delaware already understands most of the things that should govern that agreement without it being written in black and white. But I tell people, if you must do a safe agreement in Nigeria, then it's no longer going to be simple. It has to become a complex agreement that would spell out in detail all the things that would happen, so that when the Nigerian court is asked to interpret that agreement, he will not be at a loss. Let the agreement explain to the court how the agreement should be, should operate. But if you are doing it in the US, you do not need to explain all of that. The judge already knows, because the default position of the law there supports that agreement. So some things that are not written in black and white, the law in the US would supply them by implication. But if you did the same thing in Nigeria, you will not have that benefit. So these are some of the dangers of simply copying and pasting a safe agreement in the Nigerian system without doing a proper customization. So I've overshot my time. Let me end at this point and look forward to your presentation and to the interaction and question and answers. So Dennis, back to you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Max, for sharing your thoughts and just giving us a very, very detailed introduction into the topic for today. We really, really do appreciate, and we're able to, I hope for the mentees, I did, right? But I hope for the mentees, they were able to pick up several things from what you pointed out. We also have in the class Mr. George Bienwuchi. Thank you so much, Mr. George, for joining. We are happy to have you around. We also want to give you, sir, the opportunity to share with us your thoughts and what you have in mind for us in today's class. Like we said, our topic for today is fundraising for startups, sir. So we don't know if that is something that you would want to do. So thank you very much, Mr. George.
All right, Dennis, thank you. Good morning, class. Good morning, everybody. I hope I'm clear. Sorry, I'm on the road. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I do have a hard stop for 12:45, so I'm sure we'll make this as quick and then be able to wrap up in time. Interesting, very interesting topic. I think we'll try to make this as practical and as very spotted to the class, and I would like to have like a sense of the class, right? Because fundraising is quite a broad topic. Depending on the stage of the startup life cycle that you are, different elements of fundraising matters to you. I'll just do a quick question, and then because I'm on the road, you might want to help me respond on behalf of the class, so that I will just, because I can't look at the screen that much, right? Just a quick question. How many people do you have in the class today?
So we have almost about, well, give or take 60 people. The numbers are fluctuating, but they're about 16.
Okay. Now, I would like to know how many people here are looking to or are already at the stage of trying to start a company. How many? Can you just do it like a quick show of hands? Like, how many people are either looking to or at that idea stage where I'm almost starting a company, or I'm thinking about it, seriously? Can we just have like just a quick show of hands? Dennis, I just want to just give me a sense of if there are people
Okay.
here that are looking to start a company, or at that stage where they just started a company.
We have
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Yeah, I said we have 2 people's hands up.
Okay, all right. And then how many people have already started the company and the company is like running already? Is there anybody in the class that already has a company that is running?
Okay, so if you have a company that is running, please indicate that.
Just a show of hands.
Okay, we have 1 person.
All right. Okay, that's fine. All right. So the part of fundraising. Thanks, Dennis, and thanks, class. Now, the part of fundraising that we look at, or the element of fundraising that we look at, like I said earlier, is a function of where we are or the stage we are in that company life cycle or startup life cycle, right? They are basically about broadly, right, 5 stages, right? I'm going to be very much concentrating around the first three, then largely the first two, because I believe that a lot of us here are within that cycle, right? We have the idea stage, right? When your company is at an idea stage, right? Where you either still have it as an idea in your mind and you want to bring it to life, right? Or you're barely in that company formation stage. You're trying to translate your idea into an actual company, right? You're at the idea stage, right? Then we have what we call the early stage. The early stage is where you have now formed the company. The company has started to run, but it's just in its early days, right? And it can typically go from 1 day to like 6 months, depending on how fast or how slow your start is. Sometimes it can stretch as much as even 2 years, right? You can be early stage and you are 2 years in and you're still early stage. Basically, it's a function of like how your growth as a company is, right? But early stage is when you've now started the company and you're just gradually trying to take off. Yeah. We have the growth stage, right? The growth stage is where you have now found product market fit, what we call product market fitness. So, because when you start a company, you bring out a product or solution, more often than not, all the assumptions that you made before bringing that product out, you find out that a lot of them are wrong, right? You still have to do some tweaking here and there, some adjustment here and there for your product or your solution to actually fit the market, right? So at that stage, you're literally at the stage where we call you're trying to find your product market fitness. Then you now get to that point where you have found that product market fitness, and then people are now patronizing you like you're growing fast. Yeah, you're growing very rapidly. You're acquiring like say 500 customers daily. 500 users are signing up to your application daily, right? 1,000 customers in a month, depending on the kind of market that you are in. You're growing fast on a daily basis, rapidly, right? You're on the growth stage. Yeah, and those are like the three stages I want to concentrate in, because I believe that most of us in this class are among those three stages, right? We have later where you start talking about maturity, and then of course exit, right? Exit stage, right? Where you're either selling off, or you're going you've matured enough, or you're going to the stock exchange and all that, like so you've left growth. So but from the idea stage to the early stage and then the growth stage are largely where bulk of the startups live and die, right? Between going from an idea and getting to that growth phase, a lot of startup obituaries happen, and capital is a major cause of that obituary, because you need capital to run. So the $1 million question is, how do I find capital, right? Um, Now, there are different ways to raise capital, right? And I'm also going to touch on those different ways, and I'm trying to affix this different capital to your different stage as a company. Yeah. If you're in the early stage, for example, um, the first thing you're thinking of at that time is, I have an idea, right? I want to bring this idea to life. How do I fund bringing my idea to life? Now, you need to first of all understand what your cost is. Like, what do I really need? How much capital do I really need? What are the things I need to fund? Do I need to fund the building of the application? If it's a digital product, if it's a physical product, do I need to fund getting my shop set up or renting my office space? So you need to first of all understand, what is the cost? What exactly am I looking for capital for? Right? You don't jump into the market, or you don't just start looking for capital for capital's sake because I have an idea, I need money. You need to understand, what do I need that money and how much do I need? What exactly am I going to use that money to do in very clear terms, right? When you've been able to define all that, then you now ask yourself, how do I get the money? Now, as an idea stage where you're thinking about the idea, and I wanted to bring that idea to life, there are capital sources that are open to you, and there are capital sources that are not open to you, right? The first capital source that is open to you at the time is your personal savings, right? If you're thinking about starting a company or thinking about bringing an idea to life, you now start thinking about, okay, how much do I need and how can I save to fund this idea, right? Do I have a savings I want to deploy into um, starting this company? So your personal savings, no matter how little, is the first source of funding that you get to, right? As an idea phase company, right? Where you're trying to start a company, right? Nobody believes in your dream to get to the moon, right? More than you. Or nobody believes in your dream of that idea and that business more than you. So your skin in the game, right? Your personal savings is the first place that you get to say, how much do I have to put in this company? Now, when you get away from your personal savings, the next funding source that's open to you is the three F's, like they popularly call it, the family, friends, and the fools. Family would always support your dreams, no matter how crazy most of the time it sounds. If not for anything, just to make you happy or so that they don't say, you won't say the family didn't support you, even when they're not agreeing to what you want to do. So most of the time, family, you might find family that will be willing to take, a penny or two bets on what you're doing, right? So you reach out to family, right? You reach out to friends. Who are the friends that will happen to believe in what you're trying to do, that can put some pennies together? And remember that capital might not necessarily only be in naira and kobo, and I'm going to come to that shortly, right? And which is why it's critical to you knowing what exactly you want to use the money to do, right? So, um, 'cause sometimes, for example, you need, if it's, for example, you're looking for an office space, you're looking for a physical place to stay, right? If you want to get plant and machinery, maybe you need a particular equipment, yeah? So, family, friends, and fools are the next set of guys that you have access to raise funds from, right? The fools are basically people that believe in your dream, right, or whatever idea you're trying to do, and they typically call fools. Is a tag that is given to people that give you money at this stage, because they know that more often than not that money is going to get lost, right? Anybody that gives you money at an early idea stage, when you're still thinking of whatever it is that you want to do as an idea, um, should expect not to get that money back, right? Um, it's not a calculated risk, right? For the most part, it's a gamble, right? It's more of a gamble than a calculated risk, because more often than not, that money is not coming back. So, and that's why they are called fools, right? Because they are throwing away money typically, or they have to be willing or ready to throw away money, for your sake, right? At that stage, all right. So you get the fools, right, that are willing to give you that money that they might likely never see again. Now, these are the second stage or second source of funding to you at the idea stage. Now, the third source of funding to you when you are at the idea stage is what we call implicit finance or sport finance, and that comes across through strategic partnership, and you need to pay attention to this, right? Strategic partnerships can help you raise a good amount of capital to start your business. That strategic partnership can even come in form of having people partner with you, right? I want to, for example, build an app, right? That does whatever. I need to pay an engineer. I need to pay a developer, right? Maybe I need like 2 developers to help me build this app. And the cost from all the stuff that I've, um, uh, um, all the research and all the people that I've reached out to, they've been costing me 2 million to help me build this app. And I don't have 2 million naira, right? And I reach out to them and say, hey guys, outside doing this as a service, right? Do you actually believe in this idea? What do you think about it, right? Now, you might need to talk to 50 engineers to find the guy that will say, okay, this is actually interesting. Let's partner. I'll build it, right? Either as a co-founder to you or as a strategic partner where we share revenue, or I'm going to use the, when we acquire users, I have another thing I want to also market to the guys. Whatever the arrangement is, you can get someone that can offer you that skills in form of a partner, either an equity partner where they are your co-founder, or a strategic partner where they are also leveraging the output of your app. Maybe your users that you are going to acquire, they are going to have the right to access that database to market something else to them, whatever it is. You might want to start a physical business. Let's say I want to start a class. I'm a tutor, just the way Jiipcc is doing here today, right? And Jiipcc wants to start a physical class, like they want to start a small school, right? They need space, which is going to cost them money to rent a space, right? And Jiipcc looks around and say, you know what? There is this church just close to the location where we want to run um, this service, and they have a hall, right? They have a conference room. Can we go to the church and say, hey, you know what? Give us your space for our class. We have a mentorship program that we want to be running here every weekend, let's say every Saturday and Sunday. And in exchange, we're going to do a free program for the church youth, and we're going to take them on a program that we are going to be uncovering all the resource costs for that program. We're going to volunteer for the church to be training the youth, right? And in exchange for that partnership, we have access to use the conference room or the hall of the church to be doing our mentorship classes, right, every weekend over the next 1 year. And they'll sign a partnership. Now, if they were going to rent that space, maybe that space probably would cost them, 5 million per year or 10 million per year. But they've entered the strategic partnership with the church. It can even be a school, right? And say, hey, during the weekends, let's use your conference room for our mentorship program, and in exchange, we'll create a curriculum for your students, right? Whereby we will teach them entrepreneurship every class, or every GSS 1 to SS3. Every class we have a 30 minutes mentorship entrepreneurship class, right? That we'll do after school, maybe from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, right? And in exchange, we're going to have access to use your hall or your class on weekends for our mentorship program. So that partnership that they enter gives them access to a space that they need in exchange for what they are going to do to the school, thereby saving them or giving them capital for the space that they probably would have used, say, a 5 million naira or a 10 million naira, right, to rent. Yeah, so strategic partnerships are very critical elements of capital raising, right? That at an idea stage you need to think, right? A lot of that is how much power of thought that you have to be creative, to say, what do I need, and who has what I need, and what can I offer the person to get what I need, right? If you're able to understand what you need, and you're able to identify who has the resources that you need, right? And then when you identify who has the resources that you need, you can be able to figure out what can I offer to this person that has the resources that I need for me to get this resource from them, and thereby significantly cutting the amount of physical naira and kobo that I have to spend to get my company started. So strategic partnerships are a very, very key capital fundraising source if you are on the idea stage, especially when you are very limited in actual cash, naira and kobo to start your business. Now, the fourth one that is open to you at that idea phase, of course, is angel investors, right? Angel investors are guys that are typically set up to fund ideas and startups, right? They are called angels because, once again, just like the concept of fools, only an angel will give you that money at that stage, right? Because the probability of that money coming back is very slim, right? So they are called angels. They are typically in the literally meaning of angel, right? Somebody just sent from a higher power above, to just make your dream come true. So the monies they provide, they know that for the most part, a lot of them don't even take capital from you, don't take equity from you. A lot of them structure it whereby the ownership of that your company is time based, so that they have a time whereby you're returning that money or they convert it into a debt, right? Or for you. But most of the point, if you can't pay that money, you're not obligated as a person to return that money to them. That money goes, right? That liability doesn't extend to you as an individual when an angel investor gives you money. So that the idea blossoms and everybody's happy, or the company fails and everybody walks away and be all right. So angel investors are your fourth source of financing, right? That can be able to give you money, and a lot of them do a lot of programs. There are a lot of angel investors out there that you can apply to, right? Pitch your ideas, and they review your ideas, and if you qualify, you go through the rigorous stages, and they fund you. Grants and the rest of them are all in this bucket, right? Where you're either getting a grant or you're getting an angel investor investing in your money, in your business or in your idea to bring it back to life. So, as an idea stage company, this is like the core sources of funding open to you. Now, no bank, no financial institution is going to give you money, and they are not designed to. I see a lot of times Nigerians, a lot of people are always complaining, banks don't fund startup, banks don't do this, and banks don't do that. And you just see the lack of understanding of what financial institutions and banks are actually set up to do. No bank is set up to actually fund your idea. So because your expectation of them is to give you money as a startup to start your business, then you get that expectation not happen, and then you start to get angry with banks and financial institutions. But that is not what they are set up to do. The monies that they give out are depositors' funds, and I'm not depositing my money in the bank for a bank to go and throw it in an idea. Because if that money doesn't come back, the bank must give me my money. Any day I go there to withdraw, right? So the bank is not designed to give you money as a startup in an idea stage. So that's part of funding, trying to raise debt or loan. Forget it. Even where you have collateral, right? A bank would not give you a loan to go and start a new business. They will only use that collateral to fund an expansion, or only if that business is coming out from an existing business running. So it's going to be a subsidiary of an existing business running. But I have a fresh idea. I'm just starting a business and I go to a bank, forget it. Right? So these are like your core sources of funding. Now, if you move to the early stage, where you now have the company and the company is running, right? You're starting to acquire customers. You're starting to get revenue, right? Money has started coming in, but you now need to get to the point where you want to increase the pace, right? I need to do a lot of the spend at that point in time. Bulk of it is marketing cost, right? Because now you have a product, right? Yes, there's going to be also some part of development cost because you need to tweak the product to fit the market, right? You have launched, but you now start getting real customer feedback because now you're interacting with the market, and then the customer start telling you, letting you know, some part of your offering that is not exactly fitting to their needs. So you need to do some, product adjustment. You might need to find out, if it's a physical product, I need to adjust my packaging. My packaging is not the best packaging that will be competitive in this market. I need to change my packaging. I need to put up a new billboard. I need to do this. I need to do radio jingle. I need to do online ads. Your cost or your need for capital, is heavily between marketing and some of product development, right? Product refinements. Yeah. Now, when you are in that early stage, right? You now can use any of these first four funding that I mentioned for the idea stage, right? And then, you can now unlock the fifth guys, which are the venture capitalists, right? Now, the difference between the venture capitalists and the angel investors is the venture capitalists, they are real businessmen, right? They take more of, it's not a gamble for them, it's more of a bet, right? And somebody will ask what's the difference between a bet and a gamble, right? Okay, right. A gamble most of the time is where you're leaving a lot of things increasingly to luck and chance, right? Let me just throw this thing here and just see what happens, right? But when you're taking a bet on something, there's a bit of fundamentals that checks out for you. Be it maybe you have looked at the data and say, I've looked at this company's data, I've looked at what they've done so far in their early stage of startup, I've looked at the customer base, I look at their target market, I look at the demand of their products. I think that this company would grow by so percentage over the next 2 years, right? So I can take a bet on them. So there's a bit of work done to validate whatever hypothesis or whatever guesswork that you're thinking in trying to put resources in that company, right? You're not just doing that. Okay, this guy sounds nice, this idea sounds nice, and then let me give you some money as an angel. No. Or hey, we are designed to help the downtrodden, or we want to help women. Want to support more women business. So just about women, come and pitch and let's just give you money to start something. No, right? At that point in time, as a venture capitalist, the capital is not blind, right? There's a lot of calculations that have happened for them to take that bet on you, right? Also, the money can still go up in the smoke, right? Whatever it is that the reason why they've given you that money, there's something that they're holding on to, right? And they're taking equity in your business, right? So, with early stage capital, where you have revenue to show for it. Now, if you might be in idea stage and be lucky to unlock these fifth guys, but it doesn't happen by luck that a lot of people think. There are a lot of factors that make you be in an idea stage and unlock the fifth guys of venture capitalists. You might be a second time founder, whereby your first company is well known, you've exited that company, you sold off that company, you want to start a new company, is an idea. They will take a bet on you because of what you have done before, or you're coming out from you're a known person in an industry, you were one of the top guys within the payment space. Everybody knew you. You were a strategic guy in a payment company like Interswitch or Visa or MasterCard. The industry knows you, and then you come out and say, you know what, I want to start my thing. They'll take a bet on you because they believe that you have the domain knowledge. Everybody knows your capacity. So whatever this thing that you're doing, they believe in. It's not about the idea at that time. It's about you. It's you that they are funding, not really the idea. They believe in your capacity to make it work. So sometimes it might be in an idea stage and unlock the venture capitalist guys, but it is not as common, right? Most of the time you need to be in the early stage where you now have a business, you now started acquiring customers, you have something that they can look at. Now you started getting revenue, and then they can now say, how can we put money in this guy to make him get to the growth stage? So the venture capitalist guys come in, right? At this point in time, very unlikely to unlock the banks. The banks are not coming in too at this time, right? You still don't have enough tangibles for them to finance via equity, via debt, right? The people that can give you debt are some very special purpose vehicles. There are some finance companies that target early stage startups that have high growth, um, 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 high growth outlook, right? You're growing fast as an early stage startup. You just started just last month, and 2 months down the line, you've already acquired 10,000 customers. You've already made a revenue of let's say 5 million naira, right? You're acquiring customers every day, maybe like 100 new sign-ups for your product, right? You are quickly going to growth stage, right? You're still early stage, but you're very quickly approaching growth stage. So yeah, those strategic and those special purpose vehicles, finance company, houses, they can give you debt to get you to growth stage, but not typical, not your regular finance companies like banks and the rest of them. Yeah. Now, when you now go to growth stage, and before I get to growth stage, at an early stage, all right, the sixth capital source that is open to you, right, is product financing from your suppliers, depending on what your or partners, depending on what your line of business is, right? So you can get products from your partners or product from your suppliers, right? Before, instead of collecting money from you, they give you product or give you goods on credit, right? Credit financing. So um, instead of if you're an application of your digital products, right? Instead of them charging you upfront, they charge you at the end of the month for a partnership, but you're charging your subscribers upfront, to use your service, right? But your partners would, instead of them charging you upfront, whereby maybe this is October, instead of you paying for October partnership subscription with them, let's say October 1st, they will charge you November 1st for October business, right? But your customers that are signing up to your app, you're charging them for October by 1st of October. So you already collected that money, ahead, right? Before your partners that you're using, their whatever their APIs or whatever it is that you're using to make your service available, before you now get to pay them. So that can happen both on the digital world and also on the physical space, where you are getting goods, or you're getting access to services from your suppliers or your partners ahead. They're giving you credits ahead, and then you're not paying for it. And then after you finish selling, right, you now pay. So you can have that access to that type of capital source at early stage, right? They might not give you too much, but you start having access to that because they already see what you're doing. You started making revenue, and they see where you're going. They want to lock you in as a customer, as also a partner, because they also see your prospects. You can become the next big thing tomorrow, right? So you get to unlock that sixth funding source, right? Now, when you now move to the third stage, what they call the growth stage, that is now where you are now in the game, right? You have survived, the startup debt scare. You're now in the game. You now have product market fitness. You're now growing very fast. You now have some good wind under your sail. So by then, when you're in the growth stage of a company, is all about scale. That's now when you are now expanding. You had one shop, now you now want to have a second shop somewhere or a third shop somewhere. You're targeting Lagos. Now you need to expand and start targeting the guys in Abuja. You want to expand and start targeting customers in Uyo or Yola or in Ghana, right? That at that growth stage is all about market capture. It's all about expansion, right? Your problem is no longer, you've understood the market. You have a product that the market wants. It's all about, how do I expand? How do I scale, right? And then you're acquiring customers very fast, and that's why it's called the growth stage. So at that growth stage, you unlock another level of funding, including the first six I mentioned, right? Another funding source, the seventh one, that is where the banks come in, right? Because they are designed to finance your wheel to make it turn faster. They are not designed to help you stand up. They are designed to help you run, right? And in your running, you're also giving them or making money for them, right? So that is that point where you hear people raising $5 million, $10 million, $15 million, $20 million. At that point, it is not a question whether your product works or not. At that point, it's not a question of whether you have demand or not. It is now clear. The question is, how fast can you capture the market? What is the market that you can capture, right? How much can you expand or scale your business? Franchising comes into play. You now have a way whereby, which is the eighth one, whereby you want to franchise your product. People now come to use your brand to expand for you on your behalf. So instead of you going to Ghana, somebody is seeing that you're hot in Nigeria and comes and use your brand name and open shop in Ghana, right? Or comes and use your brand name and go to Enugu and open shop, but it's not you, right? But it's going to run as you. So you're franchising your brand, right? So at that point in time, franchising as a funding source, they now pay you to use your brand name to expand. So your company is expanding, but not necessarily you, whereby you're not expanding your cost as a business. You're selling your brand name. So the finance houses, debt comes in as the eighth funding source. Franchising comes in as a ninth funding source when you're already on a growth stage, right? So it's all about scale. Your venture capitalists are much more likely to now pour money on you, and that's where you now raise some very huge venture capitalist funding in their millions, right? If you're in the growth stage, raising money becomes lesser of a problem. It's easier to raise money. It's not a question of how much and which money, who should I collect money from, and why we're not going to go into that today. You don't raise money anyhow. There's a way you raise money. Yeah. Interestingly, I've been part of like every of these stages that I've mentioned, right? In company formation, and it's different experiences. It's been, for us or for me in any of all these journeys, right? In the guys the startups that I've been involved with, at different times. So it's important that, to wrap up here, it's important that we first of all understand where we are, right? At the company formation and company life cycle, right? Understand our need for capital for that particular phase that we are, and understand how is it's the funding, what funding sources, right, that we have access to, so that you don't waste your time, right, pushing or pursuing a funding source you can't unlock at the stage you are, right? You don't be in an idea stage and be wasting your time running around banks, pushing proposals for funding. You're wasting your time. So you understand the stage that you are, understand the funding sources that are open to you at that stage that you are, and understand how you yourself can be able to access, the capital that you need, right, to do whatever you need to do, depending on the stage of the company life cycle that you are, to meet your need. So I think I would pause here at this time, and probably can take any other further questions as we round up. I think I have a hard stop for 12:45. Thank you, guys. Dennis, can you hear me? I hope I was heard though.
Okay, yes, sir. Sorry, my mic was muted. I did not know that. Thank you very much, Mr. George. And thank you also to Mr. Max and both our mentors that really did a great job running us through fundraising for startups. I hope the mentees were able to pick up, from what they said, and things that are going to be very applicable in us trying to raise funds and raise capital for the business ideas that we may be having in mind. That is for those who are interested in pushing or starting out in business. So we will not be taking presentations. We'll be going straight to questions and answers. Because of the nature of this combined class, that's what we'll be doing. Currently, we'll be taking questions and answers. So if you really have, or if you have a question, and I suggest you do ask questions, please, you can show by raise of hands. We'll take your questions, and then we trust that both our mentors, both Mr. Max and Mr. George will be able to help address those questions. So please, if you have a question, please kindly go ahead and raise your hand. Or you can send your question to the chat box. Okay, so while we're waiting for mentees to ask their question, I think I do have a question, and my question may be more targeted to Mr. Max. And the question I have is, I think in one of the mentorship that we've had in the past, a mentor in the intellectual property class made mention of how, in a way, your intellectual property can serve as a form of collateral to obtain loans or grants from a bank. Let's say maybe your trademark or a trade secret. I don't know. I just want to ask within that perspective how feasible that actually is, right? For maybe someone who is willing to start up or already an established business, if it's possible to use maybe a trade secret or a trademark as some form of collateral to get a loan.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. Yes, I remember. I think I was one who made that allusion that yes, for startups. So, for instance, in the venture capitalist space, actually, a lot of the venture capitalists, if they are giving you money, which is why one of the first things they do before they invest money is to do a due diligence, and one of that diligence really is an IP due diligence. So they look particularly at your portfolio of patents, if you have patents, and usually that is one of the major reasons they will advance you from. So there's a practical case actually during the what we call the patent wars between Samsung and Apple, ranging from around 2013, 2014 till about 2017. Part of what was happening was that both companies were buying up startups to use their patent portfolios in the battle against the other side. So I'll give you the example of one of them. There was a startup in Israel that had a few patents in digital photography, which actually they were the first people actually to come by the idea and had a patent on using multiple digital lenses to capture one image and then superimposing. Well, maybe not to capture, but their technology was actually how to superimpose images from multiple lenses and then have a higher resolution quality image, which is what a lot of the current iPhones do. You see some have 2 or 3 lenses on them at the same time. But the software that works behind the scene to ensure that those images are properly lapped together and it give you a higher quality resolution image was one of the technologies that the patent of that Israeli startup was all about. So because of that, the company before then, they were not considered really worth much. But when the due diligence was done on them, just that patent alone made, I think, Samsung buy them for, I think, close to 100 million USD. That's just a high-level example. But at a low level, yes, for most, for even if it's not looked at as traditional collateral, like you bring a certificate of occupancy and deposit in a bank to give you a loan. But more often than not, if an investor is particularly venture capitalist, investing in early stage startups, and like Mr. George pointed out, of course, this is a startup that has gone beyond ideation. You already have at least maybe a minimum viable product, and you have you also have patents and all. Your IP actually can be part of what the investor is looking at when they look at you. Remember again, like I mentioned, that anybody giving you a loan is looking at your balance sheet really. So that could be one of the assets sitting on your balance sheet that makes them confident that even if we give you this money and your business packs up, they have to have access to that IP, that patent, for instance, and we can sell that patent. That alone would be enough justification to give that loan and for us to recover. Usually it's patents, because some of the other IPs, startups might like, okay, maybe copyright may work, but trademark rarely, because as a startup, your products might not be popular enough yet where your trademark has that level of visibility in the market that makes it worth acting as a collateral. But at a higher level, so for instance, the Coca-Cola trademark, for instance, is a viable collateral, because anybody who has the right to use that trademark can go into a new country and get millions of dollars from companies who will be willing to pay just to be allowed to use that Coca-Cola trademark to produce and market Coca-Cola products. So for startups, that might not be viable, but patents is always viable. I also gave the illustration during the last IP class on BlackBerry, for instance, how BlackBerry folded up. BlackBerry folded up because, not necessarily a startup, but a company in Canada had registered a patent on mobile communication that was the underlying technology that BlackBerry used to power the chat function on BlackBerry phones. Of course, for those who don't know, I'm sure everybody here should know BlackBerry. BlackBerry was one of the first mobile phones that really gave full connectivity and chatting functions, what we do routinely with WhatsApp and all of that now. But BlackBerry was a big deal. But unfortunately, because they did not negotiate and buy off that patent early enough, they ended up doing a settlement of almost $4 billion US. But by the time they paid that settlement, the company had run into other problems and the company folded. But if they had, negotiated and bought that patent much earlier, then they would not have run into that trouble. So it tells you that for startups, particularly, if you have a unique idea, go ahead and get a patent on it. That becomes one of the useful assets you have on your balance sheet when you are going to look for funding. If anybody's funding you, of course, Mr. George said, of course, there are people who fund you, friends, family, and of course, the fools. Those ones just believe in you, or they just look at it like, well, let me give you the money. Even if nothing comes out of it, it's fine and good. But if you are going for serious investors like venture capitalists, private equity people, they are going to do due diligence. They want to see what IP you have. And then sometimes also it's not just positive IP, it's also negative IP. They want to be sure that not only is your IP good, but also that your IP is not toxic, because you could also have or your product would actually be infringing on other people's IP. So that's part of what the due diligence is all about, to be sure that they put their money in, somebody will not come and sue the company and say your product is actually infringing on somebody else's patent. So it can be double-edged sword. It can be both an asset, it can also be a liability. But that is why, as a startup, you must have a system in place to assess what your IP is, to protect on the positive side, to also access to be sure that you are also not infringing on other people's IP. So I can also protect on the negative side and ensure that you either differentiate your product away from existing IP and you're not infringing. But bottom line, yes, your IP actually can serve as collateral, and really indeed, for any funding you are going to raise, one of the things people are looking at that they'll commit money to you is really your IP. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Max. So I think we'll be taking questions from the chat box. Okay, Joy, please, you can go ahead and ask your question, and then we'll take the question from Azimat. Hello, Joy, are you with us?
Yeah. Yes, I am here. Good morning, everybody. Or good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Please,
Can
go
you
ahead.
hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Joy, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, yes. So my question is on pitching, right? As a startup that has this idea, we get the opportunities of meeting investors. So my question is, if or when we have the opportunity of meeting these investors, either as a venture capitalist or an angel investor, or those who can fund us using equity, how or what is the right process to put our work together so that when we want to pitch to these potential investors, we won't sound boring to them, we won't sound inexperienced or unserious. So a question for the mentors is, how would they address the idea of pitching? So that's my question.
Okay, thank you, Joy, for your question.
All right.
I don't know if Mr. wants to tackle this first, and then maybe if Mr. Max also wants to share his thoughts, he can also do that. Mr. George, are you with us? Okay, Mr. George is no longer on the call. Mr. Max, do you have anything you would like to share in this regard?
Okay, thank you. Okay, I suspect Mr. George said he had a hard stop. Perhaps, okay, but I thought he said 12:45, or maybe he had to drop off. But yeah, so thanks, Joy, right, for that question. So the quick answer to your question is there's something we call an elevator pitch. An elevator pitch is just a scenario that paints a picture of, say, you get into an elevator, and then the elevator is going maybe to the 15th floor, and you got in on the ground floor, and then the elevator stops at the first floor, and the person that walks in is Bill Gates or maybe it's Dangote, and you only have, and he's also going to maybe he's stopping at the 13th floor. So you only have about 3 minutes that the elevator is going to move from that first floor up to the 10th floor where he's going to drop off. What will you tell him to get him to invest in your company? So the elevator pitch paradigm is just to help you understand that you must break your value proposition into such a short and sharp narrative that you can deliver it very quickly. So the elevator pitch is not the time to now start long stories and all that. The man, of course, like you said, more often than not, when you meet these investors, I mean, even in reality, of course, we know the likelihood, particularly in this part of the world, even if you meet Dangote in an elevator, the likelihood is to be with his aides and all that. They won't even let you speak to him. But the point is, yes, these are very busy people. They don't have time for, rigmarole and roundabout. So you must know how to present your idea in a compelling way. And what we mean by compelling is that you need to also understand that what attracts and holds people's attention is something that solves a problem that they have, or a problem that they know from their own context can bring money. So if, for instance, you meet, say, a Dangote, for instance, Dangote will, of course, have many challenges. You are a startup, for instance, that helps in tracking, maybe you are a startup that is creating products that help to track employee productivity, for instance, and you meet him in an elevator. Of course, what you want to lead with, first of all, is to give him a bold statement, on what your product can do. So it could be something like research has shown that people who work at high value organizations like the Dangote Group, for instance, spend an average of 3 hours out of the 6 hours they work every day on their phone, checking emails and also checking social media and all of that. However, we have a product that is able to help people focus on the work that needs to be done and not get distracted. So the app, for instance, has an alarm that triggers once the person leaves productive work like email checking and starts checking Instagram and all that. So it's just about how you presented that. And Dangote has been thinking that, yeah, I noticed people in my office, they claim to do a lot of work and we are not seeing as much people as we want. That can immediately grab his attention. But I mean, this is just an example. But what it just means is that you must be able to communicate your product in few words, in a direct manner, that once you see the person and you give him the idea, immediately the person is interested enough to say, take my card, give me a call, and let's discuss the more. So you must, if you already have a product, you have a big business plan, your pitch doc that has 20 slide deck and all. And of course, another advice is that even your pitch deck shouldn't have more than, I think, people who know say it shouldn't be more than 5 to 7 slides in your pitch deck. Otherwise, it becomes boring. Usually what happens is that note that you should have a comprehensive pitch deck. When the person has gotten interested in you and now says, give me your card, then at that point, you can now give him a 30-page pitch deck that he will share with his own team to do due diligence on. But the one that he's going to read, that the investor is going to get the investor hooked on to get him in, usually it's not more than 1 or 2 pages. Or even if it's going to be a 5-page document, it's just that what he sees on the first and the second page is what would make him either give attention to you or just know that this is one of those other people who is just coming to bother me, and he would not. So in the same way, if you ever have the opportunity of meeting an angel investor, or any investor at all, you must lead with your value proposition first and get the person's attention so that he's the one asking you, but how would this your product work? Then you can start explaining the how. But lead with the value proposition, get the person interested. Then sometimes it is he himself or his team members who get back to you and can start walking through all the details. Of course, sometimes a astute investor would ask you a few questions. You should also be ready to answer those questions. But by the time he's asking you questions, it means that your elevator pitch has worked, because you have grabbed his attention enough for him to be interested to now start asking more questions. But one of the things in investment is that a passive response is actually bad news. A negative response sometimes is even better news than a passive response. So you do your elevator pitch and you say, oh, that's good, interesting, oh, that's nice, well done, well done, well done, well done. Of course, that means the person is just trying to get rid of you and get out of the elevator and go away. If the person now says, no, this cannot work, this cannot work, that means he's actually thinking, he has thought about it, you got his attention enough to make him think, to reach a conclusion that it cannot work. That there's even hope that if you can show him that it will work, you have gotten him interested, unlike the person who passively just said, oh, well done, and all. That means he didn't engage with it. The well done is just coming from his mouth. His brain is thinking about, the contract is going to sign. He didn't give you attention at all. Then, of course, a positive response is always a good thing as well. So my advice would be, know your product enough, know your value proposition so well that in few words, you can communicate it in a manner that is going to get the person interested enough to ask further questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Max.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Joey. So just to ask the last question on the chat box here, the question is from Azimat Issa. The question goes on the issue of, I think it's targeted to you, sir, Mr. Max, on the issue of venture capital / equity investments, having so much power and control over the company because of the capital they have provided for the startup. My knowledge on the concepts, sorry. I'm having a little issue reading it over from my end. Let me try and see if I can read it from my other device. Okay, the question goes.
Don't worry, Dennis, I've read it.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I've been. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks so much, Azimat. Yeah, this is actually a good question, and like I said, this is why in the startup space, fundraising is for the entrepreneur is not an easy thing, because many entrepreneurs are sound technically, they are not sound, in these financial things and all. That's why one of your co-founders ideally should be somebody who would sit as your CFO, your chief financial officer, should be someone who is actually knowledgeable in these areas. So, but Azima, to your question now, so let me use this opportunity to just dissect what a venture capital or a private equity investment, the typical scenario and landscape of that investment is. The venture capitalist or the private equity are alternative sources of financing. We know that the primary or the traditional method of financing is financial institutions like banks. So it means that normally, if you want to do a business, the normal person you should go to get money to do your business is a bank. But you know that banks only do or predominantly do debt financing, because for them also their business model is simple. Sorry, when you ask me a question, I apologize that I always go a lot back, but what I found out that in a program like this, what will benefit you more than a specific answer is to understand the broader context in which these issues happen. So allow me to go a little bit back before I come forward. Now, we need to understand that the way financing at its large level works is that the financial system is built on what we call intermediation. Intermediation means simply that people have money that they want to use tomorrow. Other people have needs that they want to meet today and make money tomorrow. So intermediation in the financial system simply means there's a middleman who meets the person who has money that he wants to use in 10 years' time. He takes the money from the person and gives the money to the person who has a need for the money now and who can pay it back before that 10 years' time. So that's what we call financial intermediation. That's the business that banks do. So a bank takes money from savers, usually what we call households. So you earn your salary. Of course, you are not going to spend all your salary today. You want to spend part of it. You want to invest part of it. You want to keep part of it to build a house in 10 years' time. You want to keep part of it when you retire. You want to keep part of it to pay your children's school fees when they go to university. So you go and deposit your money in the bank. Once you deposit your money in the bank, other businesses somebody who maybe wants to build an real estate project comes to the bank and takes that your money as a loan and goes to build his estate. So the bank makes his money necessarily by the profit it charges the person he gave the money to. And then he charges the person a higher profit than he pays you back interest on the money you deposited with the bank. So that's the basic way, banking works, the traditional financial system works. Now, because of the way they work, for them, they are not very averse to risk. So they don't want to give money to anything that looks risky. They want to give money to a big company that has a big balance sheet, that they are sure that if they don't pay us back, we can go and take one of their property and sell and get our money back. So they will not fund startups that are considered very risky. So that is how venture capitalists and private equity grew, to fill that gap that traditional financing would not fund. So because of that, when the venture capitalists and private equity comes in, this is the basic play of how a venture capitalist operates. The venture capitalist himself, sets up what we call, sets up a partnership where he's the general partner. He's the one to go and look for the startups to invest the money in, but he doesn't have all the money himself. So he has other people called limited partners, who are people that have long-term funds like pension funds. They have, or insurance companies. They have money that will not be needed immediately. So they bring that money into the pool of the private equity. So the venture capitalist now, who is the general partner, who is the one to manage it, now goes to look for startups who is going to invest that money into. As he invests that money into the startup, his interest is that let the startup grow, so that when I invested the money into the startup was worth 1 billion naira. We invested maybe 300 million, and we took 30% of the value of that company. So the venture capitalist now owns 30% of the value of that company. So the target for the venture capitalist is that in 5 years, let's grow that company until that company becomes worth 10 billion. So that our 30% that was 300 million before becomes 3 billion. So at that point, the venture capitalist will now exit the company. There are many ways they can exit. They can, take the company to an IPO, an initial public offering, where the company is listed on the stock exchange and the members of the public put their money in. The venture capitalist takes his 3 billion and he has made 10 times. He has made a tenfold increase on the 300 million he invested, and then he leaves. So that's the basic play of venture capital. But so you are right to say that if the venture capital is going to exit, then why is the issue of control a problem for the owner of the founder of the startup? Now, why it is a problem is because, number one, when the venture capitalist money is still in the business, remember that he also took money. The venture capitalist took money from his limited partners, the pension fund, the insurance companies, to come and invest into this startup. So if he does not make a return, he's going to bear some liability to his people. So he has to police that money to ensure that he makes a return on his investment. So the typical venture capitalist, after they give you that money and they own 30% of your company, they're also going to insist that, for instance, the chief financial officer or the auditor of the company must be appointed by them. They will insist that they have maybe the head of procurement in the company must be appointed by them and loyal to them, to ensure that, because when the 300 million comes into the company, what stops the startup founder, the entrepreneur, from taking the money and running away? Then, because for him, that's big money. So the venture capitalist is not going to leave you and just give you money and go home and sleep. They will put their eyes on you. They will be within the company. They will nominate some members of the board. They will nominate key principal officers of the company to police and ensure that their money is being used for the purpose of growing that company. So you can see that there's already an issue of control there. Remember also that at the point they are exiting your company, if you had taken that money as a loan and you grew the company to 10 billion, you would only pay them back their 300 million and maybe interest of, say, even on that 100 million, 400 million. The remaining 9.6 billion would have been your money. But because you have given them 10% interest, 30% share in your company, you can see that your own share has reduced at the point of exit. So can you now see why, even though they are going to finally exit your company, you still have to be concerned, about retaining your control. Remember that when they are exiting your company, they are not giving you back their control; they are giving it to other people. So if the company is taken to an IPO and the share is sold on the stock exchange, the 30% that they owned before will be sold to other people, and they will cash out and leave. Those other people are going to come and become your co-owners in the business. So it doesn't mean that at the point of exit, you are going to regain your control back. No, except you have enough money to buy them off, which you likely will not have. Because at the point they are exiting your company, new people are coming to take their place. So that's why the issue of control, is still a concern even at the point of exit as well. Azimat, I hope I've answered your question very well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Mark. Thank you so much, Mr. Marks, for the very detailed explanation. Okay, I saw someone raising their hands. Bill, we can take your question. Yes. Clinton, you can go ahead, ask your question, and that will be that for this class.
Okay, good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. My question is quite straightforward. Mr. George mentioned that banks don't usually fund early stage and idea stage startups, and they're usually involved in the growth stage. I assume what he meant by that was commercial banks. I want to know, what role do investment banks play in funding startups? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you. When I saw your name, Bill, I'm saying maybe I should be doing my elevator pitch to you, Bill Clinton. It's not easy to get into the same Zoom meeting with Bill Clinton. But thank you for that question. Yes, that's also an important question. So investment banks actually play a lot more in the private equity space. Because there's a difference between an investment bank and a commercial bank. A commercial bank is the one I described earlier. They are just primarily financial intermediators. They are just standing as a middleman to collect money from the members of the public who do not need the money immediately, and to give the money on a short-term basis to the people that need it. So typically, commercial banks don't do very long-term loans. They will do a 2-year loan, 3-year loan, and all of that. Investment banks are slightly different. So investment banks do longer-term loans, and investment banks usually do not deal directly one-on-one with retail customers. That means you can't go and open a salary account, for instance, in an investment bank. They are not really bothered at that lower level. So most investment banks, their own the customer end of their own equation is usually other banks. So it is usually a commercial bank that will go and place money with an investment bank. So the commercial bank, for instance, has certain long-term funds in its custody. It will place to an investment bank for the investment bank to help it invest the money and make a return on investment. Investment bank use they have a broader range of the end customers that they give their loans to. So they usually are not structured as loans. So a lot of times investment banks do equity. So for instance, when Dangote is building a refinery now, part of the money is supplied by commercial banks. But the longer term capital will usually be supplied. Even if the commercial bank wants to give him that money, they'll give it to an investment bank who might come and take equity or give a longer term revolving facilities. So the commercial bank, for instance, can give Dangote a straightforward loan, $500 million, pay us X amount, pay it back in 3 years or in 4 years. But the investment bank can give a longer term financing option and say, look, we are willing to open a credit line for this refinery for the purpose of buying maybe particular types of equipment, and we'll keep that line open up to a maximum of $2 billion. So anytime you want to buy that same equipment, just simply write to us, draw down on that facility. We would now make the payment to your vendor, and we'll monitor the conditions to ensure that the vendor fulfills, and will pay him in tranches. So the investment banker is usually a lot more like a part of, more like a business arm. So they do more than just the regular loans. So for instance, the investment bank now would do an escrow. It means that your vendor who's building the equipment for you, every time they cross, maybe they are building, let's say they are building, let's say for the example of Dangote now, the vendor is building a barge that's like a ship that is going to hold crude on an intermediate basis before the crude gets into the refinery. So that investment bank now, more than just a commercial bank now, would be part of the agreement that Dangote has with the person building the ship in Korea. So the investment bank will be releasing money on a tranched basis. They'll go and check. The people have done 10% of the work. Let's give them additional money to do the next 10%. When they have done that next 10%, the investment bank, using, of course, experts, will go and check. So you can say that the investment bank is, like a business. They are more in the business. They are not just giving money on an arm's length basis. They are involved in it. Investment banks also invest in other things. Part of it also, when I talked about the people who come together as the limited partners in a private equity or a venture capital structure, the way pension funds come and put their money there, and insurance, because insurance also has patient capital. That means insurance is collecting money from you today, that if eventuality happens, for instance, you are building you own a house, and they collect money from it and say, if the house gets burnt, we'll give you 100 million back. But their hope is that the house may not get burnt in the next 5, 6, 10 years, or even never get burnt. So that money is there, not doing anything. So that's the kind of money that we call patient capital, which the insurance company will put into the hands of the venture capitalists. So the investment banker also has certain kinds of money. For instance, the investment banker, after his transaction with Dangote has gone well, and he has made a profit on that transaction, he can say that part of the profit he made, he wants to put it into the hands of a venture capitalist to go and do a fund venture capitalist as well. So you can say that the investment banker, the landscape for investment banker is slightly different from that of a commercial banker. They are a lot more, the investment banker is a lot more into investment. So for them, how they make their money is not short-term lending and getting interest like a commercial bank. Theirs is long-term. They fund the business, they fund an investment, and then when it makes money, they get more than just interest alone. Sometimes they put equity, they put a mix of equity and debt, or they put debt that is convertible into equity, or equity that is convertible into debt. So they are more sophisticated, and they are not usually, they do banking at a wholesale level, not a retail level. So you won't go there and open a savings account, at an investment bank, or open a salary account and get ATM card to spend and all of that. No, the investment banker is concerned with high level financing transactions and business transactions. So Bill Clinton, I hope that my question is my elevator pitch to you to, and I hope I was able to answer your question clearly. Thank you.
Yes, very well. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Max, and thank you, Clinton, for your question. I think it's safe to say we've done quite well in today's class. Thank you to the participants for attending this session. I hope you have learned from everything our mentors have had to share in the past 2 hours. So a big thank you to Mr. Max and Mr. George for all your thoughts shared and the very detailed explanations you have given in today's class. We really, really do appreciate. For the mentees, if you want to reach out to our mentors, please, you can connect with them on LinkedIn, and you can reach out to them if there is a need for that. All right, we've come to the end of this session. Right, so you have another session. We have another session by 5 p.m. Please come prepared, and I am sure it's going to even be more interesting, right? So let's make sure to be in attendance. Don't forget to fill in the attendance for this class. We'll be sending in the attendance for this class. Don't forget to fill it in also for the next session too. Goodbye, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. See you later in the evening.